yes, we have attained political freedom from 1994. And we're speaking now as this generation of freedom fighters that we must realize economic freedom in our lifetime. Where do we get that from? We get that from the Freedom Charter that says that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. And that should find expression in terms of the distribution and share of South Africa's wealth. If this country really belongs to all of us, we must share in the country's wealth. We must make sure that the wealth that has been stolen from our people violently by settlers and colonialists is taken back for the distribution and share of all people. That is the agenda that we're pushing as this current generation. Because political freedom, yes, we've got the right to vote, we've got, yes, universal franchise, black and white, but now we must take back that belongs to us. The land must be taken back to all those who originally own it. The mineral wealth must be nationalized. And the keys and strategic sectors of the economy must be given to the control of the state on behalf of the people, so that we are able to diversify the economy, to industrialize locally and create many job opportunities for the more than 8 million unemployed South Africans. So that is the agenda that we're pushing. We have come too far. We must take the struggle forward.
All right, so I can surmise from that you agree. We've maintained... We've maintained the right course of action.
Yes.
The theory
and
that
quite interestingly, Musa, is that when the ANC Youth League generation that made Nelson Mandela speak like that, adopted the program of action that made the ANC to be a militant organization. It also said that attainment of political power will be meaningless unless if we've got economic power. We should fight endlessly to make sure that the economy of South Africa benefits all South Africans. That is why we're taking a leaf from Nelson Mandela and continue the struggle which he has taken up until the attainment of political freedom. Now we must fight on to realize economic power freedom and economic freedom in our lifetime.
All right. So from that discussion, I think you've mentioned that the youth also played a critical role in being able to take up arms, as is quoted, to fight the struggle. So if I can ask you, Mr. Thomas, the context of nowadays society, he's mentioned that we've come from emancipation, we've come from a situation where we now have choices. Going forward, we need to paint a picture of hope for the current base of young people in South Africa. What does it look like for a young person trying to get involved in the business landscape based on the direction that the country is going? Is it a difficult task? Is the country, in terms of infrastructure and support, creating an environment that is possible, or are we still on the back foot?
Thanks for that, Musa. And I mean, borrowing on from Mr. Shivambu's opener, I think he paints a very real picture of the challenges that the country faces. Our young people face the challenge of employment, or rather unemployment, and there's multiple other layers of challenges that face our young people that I can add on to that. The issue of catching on to historical legacy, where the psychological damage that's been done to their confidence as a collective, the issue of education that everyone talks about, the issue of competing on an equal footing in a globalized economy, where South Africa, there's no room to run. South Africa has to compete on equal footing with peers that are driving levels of education, levels of innovation, and levels of thought leadership that are critical to the society and the world that you want to compete going into the depths of the 21st century. So absolutely, I think that the challenges are multiple, and all of them have to be dealt with head-on by the youth of today.
Okay. Now, the equal footing theory, that's quite an interesting one in the age of globalization. If I can just ask you, Khaya, with the advent of technology, with the advent of instantaneous information, we've all kind of on some level been standardized in terms of what we have access to and what we can do, whether it's from a mobilization perspective or whether it's from a making an impact perspective. Can you give us your understanding of how media in the global context can help to start and shape the youth and their development in South Africa?
Thank you. I think it's a mistake to think that we all have access to this information. And I think depending on where you are on the social ladder, social scale, then you have some sort of access to certain kinds of information. And first of all, most of the information that you get out there is written in English. So even if I wanted to access this information and I live in some village in the Transkei, for example, and I have a high-tech telephone, and I trying to find out what economic liberation means. but all the information I will find is probably going to be in English. So this is going to be meaningless to me. So I think that it is also quite important that, like, because we live in this, we have access to this information, we shouldn't assume that everybody has access to this information. It's very few, even in South Africa, very few people have access to this information when they need it. And if we're looking at the context of, say, like Egypt and Tunisia and all those countries where you had the revolution happening over there, even there, that revolution was actually driven by the middle class. It was not necessarily driven by people like on the ground. And funny enough, as it's been told, what happened in Egypt, especially in Tunisia, was that in Egypt, when the government decided to shut down Facebook because people were marching behind their computers, the people took to the streets because they could no longer march on their computers. And I think that that's something we've got to understand, that in South Africa, for example, give an example. I think some people keep saying we might have a revolution, something like that, that's happened in Tunisia. The difference here is that we're freedom of speech, and the government is not about to shut us down. And personally, I'm not prepared to march from Joburg to Pretoria. So, as much as I support the idea of economic liberation, I am not going to be walking all the way. So what I will do is that I will say, okay, this is the part I support about economic liberation. I will send a tweet, but you are not going to see me marching. So what I'm saying is that the moment we get so frustrated that we feel that our voices cannot be heard, and I think that the social networks they create the impression that your voice is being heard, when actually it isn't. Because right now, I may say something and you're going to have like maybe 100 people tweeting. I say something, they tweet, they retweet, and it sounds, oh, I'm being heard. You are not being heard. The guys up there don't really, they're like, oh, okay, just a little fly, troublemaker. They ignore you because you don't really have you are not a proper threat to them. So for me, I think that let's not overstate the importance of social media, especially in South Africa.